Hey, church, welcome back to my office as it is, and hopefully I'll get back into the regular office pretty soon. I like to have my other background in here. I always feel like I have one of those pretend backgrounds when I'm in here. But nonetheless, we're going to continue our study through the book of Psalms. We're going to be in Psalm 18 and just a part of Psalm 18 today, verses 16 through 29. And this is one of the Psalms, one of the first ones I think we've been in, where it actually has a subheading that kind of tells us the situation. We've had several Davidic Psalms, but this is the first one that kind of tells us the situation, where David's sitting back, kind of reflecting on what God has done for him in the victory of the enemies and what he has faced. So just right after Psalm 18, it says this. It says, "For the director of music of David, the servant of the Lord, he sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said," and then it goes into the psalm. So we know that this one is either a hymn of praise or a hymn of God's royalty, or maybe a combination of both, because David had just kind of survived that time of Saul chasing him, and he was reflecting on the goodness of God, which has kind of become a wonderful phrase that we're getting used to in songs and things like that of our time. And again, nothing new under the sun, right? And David reminds us of that goodness. And this is something we should do often. Just kind of reflect on what God has done for us. Because if we realize what he's done for us, then we can see what he can still do for us in the present and in the future. Because I think all of us have something of value, right? Either material things or people in our lives, but things that are of value. And many of us will go to great lengths to protect those things. But let's face it, we can't protect those things of value in our life 24/7, whether it's a person or a house or cars or our bank accounts, whatever it is that we believe we have of value. We can't protect them 24/7, but it doesn't keep us from going to great lengths. We put security cameras up. We call each other. We track each other. We invest money into things that protect our computers, antiviral software. I mean, we go crazy sometimes trying to protect. If you have a loved one that maybe is physically not able to care for themselves and you have to put them in a facility, you will pay maybe a sitter to be with them, thinking that'll keep them from falling. You can do everything you can, and yet sometimes people still get injured. I go through this with my patients and their families. You can do everything, but you can't protect someone 24/7. People still get hurt. So the question is then, why do we go to such great lengths to protect when we know we can't protect 24/7? Well, we do what we can to protect as much as we can. But if we know that that's not going to do 100%, and we realize that and we're okay with that, then that's okay. But if we do that and we don't realize that that's not going to protect them, and we lose our mind when something does happen, folks, we need a reality check, because God is the only being in this world and out of this world that can protect anything 100% of the time. And whether or not he chooses to, that is up to him. I mean, and we've learned this lesson, unfortunately. I hope we're learning this lesson with tragedies and disasters that happen, and we've had one just recently. Whether or not God chooses to step in and protect, one family versus another, that's in his right to do that. And and maybe that's a little bit too much for some people to hear, but if we believe in an omniscient God, a God that sees everything, a God that knows everything, and really an omnipotent God too, a God that is all powerful and has the power to save when he wants to, then we have to be able to take a step back and just turn everything over to him, right? Well, David was at a place in this psalm where he was able to say, God, you had the ability to take my enemies away from me. So I'm going to trust you that you can protect me. And if you choose not to, I'm okay with that. It's okay that we try to protect as much as we can. What's not okay is when what we've done doesn't protect, that we lose our minds and then distrust God. We have to put our full faith, which is what David was doing. So, in this hymn, understand that David had been at the brink of death. Verse 5, which isn't part of our Sunday school lesson, but he says in Psalm 18, the cords of the grave coiled around me, the snares of death confronted me. David was literally at the point of near death, but God saved him for a reason. And David understands that. But David also, through this psalm, expresses how if I came to death again, whether you choose or not to save me, that's up to you. That's kind of his attitude as he's writing this. So kind of keep that in mind as you listen and as you study the psalm. We're only going to cover 16 through 29, which is just kind of the middle part of it, but hopefully it'll get you the idea of the psalm. So 16 through 19, let's read those verses. He reached down from the high and took hold of me. So the he there is God. God reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of the waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. Now, the exact disaster that was going on at this point, the exact problem, we don't know, but we do know that it was most likely, Saul was chasing him and doing his thing, but the exact battle we don't know, which is good actually, because we can take this as a disaster in our life. Literally, with the disaster that's happened here in Texas, we can see God reaching down and pulling some of these people out of the waters, the disaster that they were going through. But listen to some of the characteristics of God in the middle of this. He reached down. This is a very personal God that was able to reach down out of the heavens with his power and with his strength and be the one to rescue. He had already mentioned something similar to this in verse 9. So again, David's reaching back from the past and saying he did this once, and yet here he is doing it again. Verse 9, he says he parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. God was a personal God. Again, a characteristic of God, reaching down and taking hold, drawing him out of these deep waters. Literally waters, maybe, instance last week, but also just the depth of destruction, the depth of the problem that he was in. Rescued him from the powerful enemy. David is admitting that whatever he was into, whatever the problem was, it was too much for him to handle. His foes were fighting against him. They hated him. Some versions use that term. His foes hated him, called him out. But the bigger part is they were just too strong for him. And David admits, I couldn't handle this, but God could. And they were confronting him, calling him out. And with all this, he was just overwhelmed. So anybody in a struggle could read this just like David did and realize that he was able to call out. Again, a personal God is our God. He is there for us to call on anytime we need help. And because of that, he was able to give him this spacious place. The idea here is that when we're in our sin, we're in our struggle, our trial, whatever you want to call this, we're getting boxed in, and there seems no way out. I think one of the examples the commentary gave was maybe like when the Israelites were leaving Egypt and they came up to the Red Sea, they seemed boxed in. And what did God do? He gave them a spacious place. In other words, he opened up the Red Sea, and all of a sudden, where they seemed there was no way, there was a way made because of God's ability to reach down from the sky and open up. And then, of course, when they got across, he closed or boxed back in the Egyptians. He rescued me because he delighted in me. God would not have done that for the Israelites or for David unless there was a delight in that people group or David himself. Just because God doesn't open up a rescue for you doesn't mean he doesn't delight in you. I don't want to get that across. But if he does open up a place of rescue, give you some space, give you an option or a way out, know this, he delights in you. He sees something of a path for you to do something in the kingdom. But we have got to see that. We have got to appreciate what God is doing. Don't ignore the miracle that is happening. Folks, again, I keep going back to the disaster that's just happening. The ugliness of how people are speaking and blaming and all this is tragic in and of itself, but it's also tragic because we have failed to see the mighty hand of God and how many people he has rescued, and some of the tremendous stories of heroism of some of the people that have been given almost superhuman strength to do incredible things. That's the mighty hand of God reaching out from the heavens to say, you go in and do this. Or some of the organizations that are going in and helping, which I highly recommend you support. It's just amazing to me that we fail to see God's hand in miracles because we're so busy trashing things we shouldn't be trashing. God is still that personal. God is still that strong. God is still that involved if we'll just open up our eyes and see it. We see those same characteristics today: the caring, the personal touch, the protectiveness, the strength, the justice of God. All of those characteristics still there that were there with David. David goes on to write in verses 20 through 24, "The Lord has dealt with me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, he has rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. All his laws are before me. I have not turned away from his decrees. I have been blameless before him, and I have kept myself from sin. The Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight." Now, a cursory reading of this, a light-heart reading of it, would say, oh, well, David's promoting a works-based faith here. I do this, God rewards me. God's rewarding me because I'm considered righteous. That's not what he's saying. Remember, his last words in verse 19 was, he rescued me because he delights in me. And he'll even say it here in the last set of verses where God is faithful to the faithful. He's pure to the pure, and so on. We'll get there in a second. But what he is saying here is, God has seen my work, my commitment to being righteous, my commitment to being loving and clean toward his statutes, his laws, and because of that, he's rewarded me. David in no way is saying he's perfect, and because of his perfection, That's why God has rewarded him. Not there at all. But what he is saying is that God is recognizing his work toward being perfect, his work toward commitment to his laws and his decrees and his statutes, his work toward being the human being that God has called him to be. And because of that, God had said, I'm going to take you out of this situation. I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to allow you to work for my kingdom. Now, remember, David messes up again later on, but it's that constant striving that David has toward the kingdom that God delights in, that God sees something in. We're never going to be perfect. We're never going to live up to the law because the law points us to Christ. But it's this faith that David has in God and what he does that counts him as righteous, just like Abraham, just like Moses, just like everybody in the faith chapter, right? David is saying, God, I put my faith in you, and I trust your laws. I trust what you're doing in my life. That's where I find my righteousness. And the same is for us. We are never going to be righteous, fully righteous. But if we put our faith in God, and specifically in Jesus Christ, we are counted righteous. But we must continue to strive to follow his commands and his laws because it continuously points us in that direction. We can't just say, you know what, I accept Jesus Christ and then continue to live our lives in a way that doesn't point to Jesus Christ. That doesn't make sense. In fact, I would question your decision that you even believe Jesus Christ. David is saying, God delights in me because I trust him and I continue to point my life toward him in the fact that I obey his laws. I don't turn away from his decrees. I live my life as blameless as I can. And because of that, my life is clean as it can be. We should always look to see how we can, clean our lives, make our lives more righteous, not to build ourselves up, but to point others toward Christ. So what steps can you do? How can you improve your life? Not for salvific reasons, but relational reasons. Because the last section, verses 25 through 29, it says, to the faithful you show yourself faithful. To the blameless you show yourself blameless. To the pure you show yourself pure. I want to stop there before I read the next sentence. There's a relationship here. It's again not about salvation. It's just that relationally, God's going to draw closer and closer. The more faithful you are to him, the more faithful he's going to be to you. The more blameless you lead your life, the more God's going to show a relationship to you and reveal more to you. The more pure you live your life, the more you're going to see the purity of God. The next line kind of scares me, to be honest. It says, but, in verse 26, but to the devious you, God, show yourself shrewd. Now, I'm praising God, it doesn't say to the devious, he shows to be devious as well. But it does say to the devious, the crooked, some versions say, he is shown to be shrewd, or he deals wisely with. He thinks through this and tries maybe to, I don't want to say manipulate, but tries to point them in a better direction. He's very thoughtful about it. Maybe that's a better phrase. He wrestles with them, always trying to get them to be less crooked. But he doesn't have to do that with somebody that's trying to be blameless, trying to be clean, trying to be pure. With that, God is just open and saying, hey, here I am. Here's more of me. You know, think about it this way. When you're hanging out with people that are like-minded, have the same spiritual habits, have the same moral standards, have the same ethics, it's really easy to hang out with them. You're free-spirited, really. When you're meeting somebody for the first time and you don't know what their religious views are, their political views, or these days, even what their, I hate to say it, but their pronouns are, you're walking on eggshells, and you have to be kind of shrewd in how you deal with them because you don't want to offend them. Well, God's not worried about offending anybody. But it's a weird relationship, right? Until you know what that person feels and thinks and all those things. But as we live our lives blameless and clean and pure and all those things, God says, here I am. And I'm an open book. Which relationship do you want, right? He goes on to say after that, he says, you save the humble. You lift them up. You love them. You take care of them. But bring low those who are haughty, or those that think higher themselves. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. In other words, God, you are my hope. You're the one that keeps me going. With your help, I can advance against a troop. With my God, I can scale a wall. David is saying, you're the one that gives me hope. You give me strength. With you, I can do anything. It's the Philippians 4:13 version, Old Testament version of Philippians 4:13. With your strength, I can do all things, he says. With you by my side, I have the ability to do what I need to do. The first part we read says I couldn't do anything because they were too strong for me. But God here, he says, with you, I can overtake my enemies. If you want an open relationship with God, follow his statutes, follow his laws, follow his word, and get to know him better. Have that tight relationship with him. He'll reveal more to you. If you want to have a relationship that you have to walk around on eggshells, you keep going the opposite direction, see what you get. It's not going to be something you want. Case closed. Let me pray for us. Father in heaven, I thank you for this day and for the word that is truth. Thank you for people like David that were just so open and honest about their relationship with you, helping us to develop a better relationship. Father, thank you for what you've done in the past, what you've gotten us through, each one of us in our own situations, reminding us because of what you've done shows us what you will do, what you can do and what you will do. And I praise you for that. I pray all this in the mighty name of Christ Jesus. Amen. Well, folks, I pray that this helps. As always, study. We can have great conversations on Sunday. We can help each other out, building better relationships with one another and with God himself. Hope you have a great week. God bless. Bye-bye.